Hey guys, it's Quana back again with another review, quarantine edition. So I look a little rough, but I apologize. Hope you are staying safe. Hope you are staying well. So I just wanted to come through and do a quick review of the Clark Sisters, First Ladies of Gospel, the Lifetime movie that everybody has been buzzing about. It is almost a week old now, or at least to the viewing public. And so I just wanted to come through and give you my thoughts, my opinions about the movie, both from an artistic film review side and then also from the side of just a fan who enjoys the Clark sisters and wanted to know more about their story and how they kind of came up through um, their youth into being these gospel legends and gospel royalty that they are. Let's get started. So, if you are here, you have probably seen the movie already. But in case you haven't, this is your spoiler warning right now. Do not get mad because I am going to be talking about everything from the beginning to the end to the in between to what may have been depending on when you saw it. If you saw it the first run through, parts that might not even be in the free version that is being aired on Lifetime's app. So spoilers abound. So just be prepared for that, okay? All right, so just in case you are under a rock or you are Wendy Williams and you don't know who the Clark sisters are and you are not aware of them prior to um, Easter Sunday, the Clark sisters are gospel legends and gospel royalty. They were five sisters. You've got Jackie, Denise, Dorinda, Twinkie, and Karen, um, who were brought up by their mother, Dr. Maddie Moss Clark, who was a artist, a singer, and a choir director. She was the international choir leader for the Kojic ministry. Kojic is Church of God in Christ. And she went around and helped other churches and other choirs to achieve unique sounds and to strengthen their choir sound. And she had these five girls who were naturally gifted. She saw natural gifts in them and talents, and she was, of course, she's going around teaching all these other choirs, so she's using her own children to bounce ideas off, and eventually they become their own group. They started well into like they were in the 60s beginning, so the kids were all super young when they got started. I mean, Jackie's the oldest. I think she was born in like 47, and Karen is the youngest, and she is around my mom's age. I think I want to say that maybe she was born in like 63, I think, but like she's right around my mom's age. She might be a couple of years younger than my mom, actually, or older, yeah, just a couple of years older than my mom. So there's a lot of time between the sisters, but they started in the 60s and their sound kind of became solidified in like the 70s. They had hits through the 60s, the 70s, the 80s. They took some time apart from each other. They had their own ventures, their own solo careers, and in the 90s and 2000s, they had solo albums that were being released. I remember being a college student and I knew who the Clark sisters were. Like most people, most Black Americans, you get up Sunday morning, you're getting ready for church, you're listening to the gospel radio station because it's back in the day. You really couldn't find secular urban radio stations that were not playing gospel music on Sunday. That's a little different now. Now you can turn on the radio station to an urban station and you might get some blip, 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 blip on a Sunday morning. But back in the day, for you young people, you only heard gospel music on Sunday. So when you were getting ready for church and you were getting all lotionified and shiny and ready for your Sunday best, you were listening to church music. And when you were in the car, you were listening to church music. And when you got out of church, unless you got out of church after 3 o'clock, it was church music on the radio station. So only it was like 3 o'clock, maybe one some places, but like 3 o'clock before they would even play anything secular on the radio stations when I was growing up. And I was not a church kid. My mom didn't have me in the church all the time. When we did go to church, we went to Pentecostal churches. We might have gone to a church in God in Christ, um, like for a little while, and they're very similar. But we were not like, super super saved growing up. That came much later in life. But as a college student, getting involved in church, I bought Dorinda's first, well, her, was it her first solo album or her second? I want to say it was her first solo album. I bought the reunion albums. Like, I had all of that. So I was well aware of them. So that was just a brief history in case you did not know who the Clark sisters were. So everyone has been excited and anticipating this movie since the trailers first hit, because it was very evident from the early trailers that, at least sonically, the movie was had a lot of potential. And we, of course, in the African American community, we love a good biopic film, but we have been given trash recently. The Aaliyah movie was trash. Sorry to everybody was involved, but the Aaliyah movie was trash. The TLC movie, it was all right, that much, but could have been better. No shade to the actresses who were in that particular movie, because I believe that they were well casted for that movie. Visually, they looked the part. We're not even going to talk about any Whitney Houston anything up in here, because we're just not going to desecrate the Queen's name like that. So we love a good biopic. So we've all been anticipating. And of course, with the quarantine going on, with us all being on lockdown, what else were we going to do? But we were going to tune in and watch the Clark Sisters movie. So let me start by saying, if you have never seen the Terrell Grice show on YouTube, the Terrell show, and his show, he does video reviews and he does the game Song Association. I've been watching Terrell for about a year and a half now. So before his Song Associations really got like super, super like popular, I was watching him when he was just doing reviews. And I remembered when he dropped his first Song Association. So I've been rocking with him for a while. But about 8 months ago or so, he had one of the actresses that was going to be in the film, Shalea, on. And her episode was really, really good. And she mentioned a little bit about the Clark movie, the Clark Sisters movie, but not much. And then right before this movie aired, over the past month, he's aired one with Christina Bell, who plays Twinkie. And then like the week of, he aired his Clark Sisters, which was phenomenal episodes. Watch those, please. So, Portraying the Sisters, first you have to go to the fact that, one, okay, just to kind of recap the movie, you have Anjanou Ellis, who plays Dr. Maddie Moss Clark. And can we just go on record right now? We just not even going to let the rest of the review run without saying Anjanou Ellis deserves everything in the world. Her name it should be right underneath, in my opinion, Angela Bassett, Anjanou Ellis. I'm sorry. And I am a Viola Davis stan, like hardcore stan. I would say those three. I would say in terms of black actresses, Anjanou Ellis, Viola Davis, Angela Bassett. Those to me should be like the queens of acting. When you talk about range, when you talk about embodiment of a character, believability, every role you see her in, you believe her. She is transformative. So she just needs everything. And I am a hardcore Oscar and Emmy watcher and Golden Globe watcher. She was nominated for her role in When They See Us, and I was devastated that she did not win. If she does not get an Emmy nomination for this movie and then win, I'm done. I'm done. I'm done. I'm big done. Okay, I need y'all to understand this. So Anjanou Ellis plays Dr. Maddie Moss Clark. And I'm not going to remember everybody's names off the top of my head. I'm so sorry, and I didn't take good notes. I believe you have Angela Perquette, who played Jackie. Jackie Cullum Chisholm, or Jackie Clark Chisholm. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. You have Shalea Frazier, who played Dorinda Clark Cole. You had, of course, Kiki Sheard, who played her mother, Karen Clark Sheard. You have Raven Goodwin, who played Denise Clark Bradford. And then you've had um, Christina Bell. I hope that's, I keep seeing Catherine Bell in my brain, but I believe it's Christina Bell, and I hope I'm not messing that up, who played Twinkie. Okay, so those were the primary actresses involved in this movie, and then of course behind the scenes, as part of the executive producing staff, you have first of all, Anjanou Ellis was a part of that executive producers. You had Queen Latifah, Missy Elliott, and oh my gosh, who am I forgetting? And Mary J. Blige, duh, who were executive producers. Now, let's talk about what that means. So, executive producers are people who put up money to help back a film. They're also those people who go out to the networks or to the film studios to promote the film to get the movie greenlit. So sometimes they can put their money involved in it. Sometimes they can just use their resume to help push and get people involved in the film. So that's basically the role of a producer. They're not the director. They don't necessarily make major decisions regarding what happens on screen or what we see once everything has been filmed. However, they can have input, so they could come on to the set. They can give their opinion. They can watch an early release of it, and they can say if they didn't like certain things or if they think, things should be edited out for release. But oftentimes, at that point, the film is already in like the early stages of like post production. So, I think more than anything, when you have certain producers attached to a project, what that really means for the project is that there's going to be a certain pressure on that director and on everyone involved to impress those individuals. And I think that there should be, when you want to do a job well, you believe in the story you're telling, you're going to do your best anyway. But having famous producers involved is going to elevate the performance, and I think that's what we see here. Now let's go ahead and dismiss some of the major critiques in terms of the film itself. Of course, one of the major criticisms is the length of the movie. That is not the decision necessarily of the director, and it's not necessarily the decision of the producers. The producers cannot force the network to greenlight a certain amount of time that they're going to allot to this film. And we have to remember that a network like Lifetime is not like BET. While BET is starting to come back and create more original content, and they're certainly doing a better job with that, because there was about a 15-year period where they got really stagnant with creating original content. They can have like a 3-night new edition story because they don't have as much original content, so they're not necessarily up against anything that's already in the works. Most of the original content that they have, which is owned by them, and when they are in production and they have that calendar and they say we're going to air it on this date, they don't necessarily have anything that is up against. They can rearrange things a little bit differently. That can be a little difficult for a network like Lifetime, that for years, it's an original content network. It doesn't really air. Back in the day, if you guys remember watching Lifetime when it first came and it was just starting to like dabble in movies, they would have these like made for TV movies that might have been filmed by ABC or somebody else, and they were like rerunning those. But for a long time, Lifetime's been creating their own content, their own movies, their own shows. And so without knowing or without maybe doing the research behind the backing that we were going to give this movie, they probably wouldn't have known to say, okay, well, we're going to go ahead and greenlight 2 nights for this miniseries. Also, if they've not had, they've probably had some success with that, with like the Surviving R. Kelly series. But if they've not had a lot of success with that with movies, they're not necessarily going to greenlight that. So I think certainly from also the decisions of the writer of the screenplay and how much material she had, The decision to make the focal point the creation of the Clark sisters, which certainly does, mean and revolve around their mother, because their mother was the one who drove them, trained them, and got them into an established grouping, and was involved in them as a group until her passing in 94. It makes sense that the focal point would kind of be on her and less on the sisters' independent projects. And so we're going to talk about a little bit about that in my review. So I just want to kind of go ahead and get that off the table and just say I don't think anyone should fault the creators or the filmmakers for that. That's a decision that the network makes on how much time they're going to allot for a film. And I certainly think maybe being that this film did get such good praise, critically such good praise, certainly more than any other of the biopics that they've made, perhaps they will in the future look at having these types of creators come together and perhaps doing a follow-up, even with the same actresses, because I think there's enough material there in the way that they filmed it. They could come back and do a sequel or a part two. And so let's get into that. So the film opens up with the sisters singing, and this is a dream sequence in one sense, or a vision of like Dr. Maddie Moss of how they're going to be when they're older. She wakes them up, they're little girls, and she gets them up and she's like teaching them the 3-part harmonies. And so this is kind of where we see the creation of like that 3-part harmony that she is famous for. So then we get to see the family set up, the norm, their father, Elder Clark, who was a pastor of a church. There was some contention between the two of them. They didn't really want to, because the sisters were still very close with their father later on in life, or at least respected him. They didn't want to paint him with a broad brush of being super abusive. I think they just wanted to show that there was a lot of animosity that he felt about how large his wife was getting in the gospel community and in the church community, and the fact that she wasn't like a traditional first lady who was just always by his side, never doing her own thing, and just always there to support him. And certainly Dr. Maddie Moss Clark, she was not the norm for women in the Kojic lifestyle. Women were supposed to be seen and not heard. They could be evangelists, they could be, choir directors, but you weren't supposed to outshine the men. And you notice that several times in the movie, where you see like there's a bishop and the bishop's looking at her and she's giving the introduction or what have you. And you can see the look on his face of like, you're doing too much. You're doing too much. And so they kind of wanted to sow those seeds early on to explain like how close the girls were to their mother. Early on, we get to see the dynamics of the sisters. You have Karen, who is the shy, kind of quieter one. And even though she is an evangelist in her own right, and even though she does interviews and things of that nature, you see that all the time with them. Anytime you see them out and about giving interviews, especially with the three of them, she operates and functions under that role of like, unless she feels led by the Spirit to say something, she's very reserved and she kind of holds back. And you have Denise, we'll talk about her in a little bit, but she's kind of like the wild one. You have, of course, Twinkie, who's like the savant, the prodigy, who I believe either because of the way that she was just always with her mother, or because of maybe something that might have been there, Twinkie has just always seemed like she didn't pick up on all of the normal social cues, like her patterns of speaking, the way that she interacts with people. Certainly spirit-filled, certainly a great gifting, but doesn't really, even her cadence and the way she speaks seems as though that there might be like, she might be on the spectrum. And I don't say that blanketly, and we shouldn't be just throwing people on the spectrum or trying to diagnose people by proxy, but I've just noticed that. So I kind of noticed over the years, even interviews going back before some of her health challenges that she's had, that she didn't quite seem, when she was in the flow of the Spirit, she could do things. And I've noticed that before, and met people before who were like that. But when you get them in like a regular social setting, they're not your average person. You have Dorinda, who's like the speaker, the preacher, the one who's like super spirit filled. She gonna drop a word in your spirit. She gonna give you a word. She gonna preach. And then, of course, you have Jackie, who was kind of like the worker. She took care of the mom. She took care of the family. She's the nurturer. She's kind of like the matriarch of the family because she's the eldest. Now, um, Denise is quick to let you know online, even she is the eldest and the first Clark sister. Now, a lot of people, I've seen a lot of things on social media kind of critiquing the sisters' apparent treatment of Denise. And I thought that the movie actually did a great job of almost redeeming Denise from some of the gossip that was out about her for years. People, were like, oh, she got kicked out the group because she had kids. And this kind of showed, well, no, she decided to take a step back. Um, and as we could saw the little, I was like, sorry, Dr. Manny Moss was about to smack me because I had gum in my mouth. As we saw later on in the movie, she kind of makes the decision to leave herself. But I knew for years that it has, or was thought for years, it had something to do with her having these children. And, she's a member of the Kojic Church. First of all, just church in general, no matter what denomination, you out here and you're on a grand stage, a grand forum, but you're having kids and you're not necessarily married to all of their fathers. That's very taboo. You can kind of come back from that, but you're not supposed to be like continuing the trend and be on a major platform. But I thought that even with that, just the innate natural desire that people have to live their own lives, I thought they did a great job of making us sympathize with Denise. And I didn't think that this really painted her as much of a villain, even with the funeral scene being somewhat loosely and we can talk about that. I didn't think that they really painted her as villainous as other people maybe interpreted it, and maybe I just had more sympathy for her. I saw her side, I saw her point of view a whole lot throughout this. But as someone who was raised by a parent who was not my biological parent, um, there is evidence that the part where she is reminding her sister that she's not a Clark, and likewise, the fact that she calls herself the first Clark sister in real life on her social media is very disturbing to me, because by all intents, by all accounts, Dr. Maddie Moss and Elder Clark were married when Jackie was a young girl. And from what I can tell, Jackie does not have a relationship or much of a relationship with her actual biological father. So I was very, I picked up on that. A lot of people might not have picked up on that, but as someone who that is my story in one way, I picked up on the fact that she treated her, she kind of used that to kind of push back. It was like her way of claiming some kind of power. And it goes to the way that the relationships were of the girls in the house. Jackie has always was the firstborn. Firstborns tend to cleave to their mothers, take care of their moms, because they were there the longest. They've been with the mom the longest. So we see her in that role. Karen gets a lot of attention because her gifting for singing is just, can we just go ahead and just say, I mean, it's her singing ability is just stupendous. They all are incredibly gifted. But Karen had that gifting. Twinkie had the gifting of being able to play and being able to travel and hear notes and interpret music. And so they all had different relationships with their mother. And the scene in the contract office when Denise says, I have nothing for you because you didn't have nothing for me, we can see that she definitely had that middle child syndrome. So I think that was a way of like hitting back at Jackie, of saying like, this my daddy. I'm the one with the legit last name. You don't have the legit last name. You don't have. And I thought that was just very harsh because they were all growing up in the household together. And for Denise's whole life, at least, her sister was in the house being raised by her dad. So the fact that there would have been anything different and that treatment, that was really hard for me. And I could kind of see how this story only scratched the surface of the animosity of where two wrongs don't make a right, but where Denise was possibly very well sowing those seeds of that, like, this is my daddy, this is my daddy, this is my daddy, and all of that. And if Jackie was naturally inclined to protect her mother, she's going to have more feelings of animosity, even if she really loved Elder Clark and treated him and revered him as a father figure. She's going to be more protective. So I thought that that was something really small that I picked up on. But we get to see the creation of like a lot of the girls' sound, a lot of their music, just some things I thought, to recap. So Maddie Moss Clark and Elder Clark eventually get divorced. Jackie moves out. She gets married. They're still forming a group. She's a nurse. She's working. The girls are being trained up. Eventually, Twinkie has to stop going to school because she can't travel around with her mom and go to school. Um, so she stops going to school, which I thought was extremely tragic because that takes away the life that she wanted to live. And yet, it's this weird question of, um, you want your children to live their own life, but if you see a gift in them and you feel like they're called for that gifting, you push them. And at some point, what will either happen for most kids is they will either fight back against it, kind of like Denise, or they will just give in and then have feelings of resentment. And I think that's kind of what happened with Twinkie, right? Because none of us can look at Twinkie and say, this girl is not a savant, this woman is not a prodigy, that she is literal, she's the mother of gospel music in one sense, and of modern gospel music. And if she is all that, would she still have attained all that if she had taken that time? Or would she have gone, we don't know. We hope that she would have, but, and I'm not a person who believes in like that kind of destiny. You know what I'm saying? Like, I believe that people have the gifts in them, and then eventually they have to make decisions about how those gifts are being used. And I think she would have always been gifted, but I don't know if she would have reached the tier that she did, because she could have very well have gone off to college, not come back to work with her sisters, not been the glue that kind of held them together. We wouldn't have had this version of the Clark sisters and that sound and the things that they were willing to do. She was playing with those sounds at a young age. And I think if she had just been, okay, go to college, study whatever she was going to study in college, would she have been as adventurous to try those things if she had to wait longer? Because usually being willing to play around with, that's usually a young person's thing, playing around with sound, being experimental. Would she have done all those things? We don't know. Um, I think, we get the least amount. We don't really get a lot of any of the sisters' individual lives. We get glimpses. So we very briefly meet Jackie's husband, in one very quick scene where he drops her off from a date, and then where he's there at the job. And then, of course, we don't see him again. We very briefly get Dorinda's husband, and he might have been in a scene later, but of course, the scene that I'm thinking most of is the scene where they're practicing, and he's a part of the choir, and he and Dorinda are flirting, which was so cute. Also, that's the same scene where we get the infamous shoe throw, and according to all the interviews and to all the daughters, that Maddie Moss Clark, she was known for throwing a shoe, which I couldn't help but wonder, is that those stories of that where she's throwing them to get people's attention, is that also where we get the throwing a shoe at somebody if they're doing a good job? Because that's not just a Jennifer, for all the Caucasian family members who may only know that from like Jennifer Hudson. No, that is a Black community thing. Like, somebody might throw a shoe, hey, whatever they got at hand, if you're doing it, you just like throw your shoe down. You're not throwing it directly at them to hit them. You're throwing it in front of them, like you don't, almost like you don't knock. I'm not gonna pull my wig off, but now how people say, like, they snatched my edges or they snatched my wig, right? It's like you saying so well that you stripped me of something. And so that's kind of where that came from. But I can't help but wonder, do we get that from Dr. Maddie Moss Clark? We meet Twinkie's husband, and of course he was abusive and he had issues. and was not working. We meet, of course, um, Pastor Sheard, Pastor Drew Sheard, and am I forgetting anybody? But we don't meet any of Denise's husbands. However, we also don't get Denise again until the funeral. So after she leaves the group, she had not met her husband at that point, and I don't think she had married even the first husband that she had, which was with her, who was with her at the funeral, because she was married, excuse me, according to her son, to one husband at the time of the funeral, and then has a new husband now, or she has a different last name now. So I don't think she was married, and I think that's why we don't get that side of it. So people were complaining about, well, why don't we get to see that? And I think it's just because really all we get is who the girls were with at the time of them being a solid group. And we don't get anything new really about their lives. We get Karen, of course, being in the hospitalization, but all of those things come after Dr. Clark's passing. So we really don't get much of the girls' individual lives while they're a group. We get the establishment of like their love interest while they're a group, and then after that, everything goes very, very fast. I think there's like only 20 minutes after Dr. Manning Moss Clark passes away. So, okay, so this is getting super long, but there are just so many good things to talk about with this movie and this recap. We, of course, get the iconic creation of You Brought the Sunshine, which was like their first like number one massive hit, played in the clubs. And at the end, they end with Blessed and Highly Favored, which has also become their, the first Grammy that they actually won, I think, was for that song. And of course, that was once they reconnected. Um, and I like the transition that they did at the end there, because it starts with the four sisters who are still part of the group, Jackie, Dorinda, Karen, and Twinkie. And then at one point, Twinkie goes away because she doesn't perform with the three sisters all the time. She only performs with them when she's well enough to do so. And so then we get the three sisters, and then it transitions from the three actresses who played those singers to the real life sisters. So my thoughts. I think this movie was very well done. I think it did give me that Jackson's An American Dream feel to the from the style of the filming, the camera that they used, the lighting, the colors. It wasn't too overly done. It wasn't too glossy. It didn't look too fake. It looked like we were back in those time periods, and so I loved that. I loved the costumes. Um, the singers, the performances were amazing. Shalea's voice is just a national treasure. I need her to get all of her things. All of the women did a great job. I thought Raven did a good job, and I think definitely the actress that plays that plays Denise, Raven Goodwin. I think she can sing, but she's not known for singing. So I know there was some talk, like Kiki had mentioned, she actually wanted to play Denise, but they weren't from the discography that they had. They weren't really picking too many of the songs that Denise led on. So it made more sense, because Kiki is known for singing, and she can somewhat mimic her mother because she has done so before. It made more sense for her to play Karen. So I think what you'll notice then, I don't think it's there are times in filmmaking where I definitely think studios, directors are nefarious, and they are trying to project people in a negative light. Some people have argued that casting Denise with a darker skinned actress was a way to vilify her. Um, I can't say that I 100% disagree with that. Um, However, knowing that this cast and the people behind the camera were all mostly black women, in this instance, I don't think that that was intentional. It might be subjective, or subliminal in nature, but I honestly think, first of all, you think that all the dynamics that they have to do with the casting of this film, you have to find heavier set women, with the exception of Dorinda, because she is the smallest of them, to play these actresses. You have to find women who can sing. Um, you have to, and that's not impossible, but there's a standard of it that you want to do well, and they didn't want to just have them um, doing lip syncing to it. They had to be able to realistically sing and to sing a lot of a cappella because some of the recordings for these are not in a good enough condition to reuse those. So they had to be able to sing live because I think we have to remember that some of those original recordings are so old and they were small labels and they weren't big nationwide um, labels that they can't necessarily just pop on a recording and play it and it's going to sound like they're actually doing it in that moment. They had to sing live. So you have to find actresses who could really do that. So they had to look for singers who could act and act reasonably well. And I thought that for that they did a great job. I think Raven being cast as Denise, I think Raven is amazing. I think it's more problematic and I for Raven. And I want to see Raven step outside of those roles because Denise's character, Niecy, is very much like her character Niecy on Being Mary Jane. Children out of wedlock, kind of wanting to live life, not really, maybe having some self-esteem issues, I don't know, but like that kind of similar sassy kind of role. And I want to see her step outside of that, but it is very hard for heavyset black women to step outside of that role. And so I think that's going to be something on the part of her agent and herself. I don't think it was as intentional in this movie. And I'm not giving it a pass because it's the Clark sisters. I'm just thinking about all of the women involved in this. Um, you know, all of the three main women have all had are not heavy set, but thick women. So I don't think it was that intentional. I think it was just simply they weren't using any of the songs that Denise led on. So they could choose someone who could carry the note and could sing, but did not have to sing stellar. So they could put their efforts on finding a stellar singer in Shalea because you had to have someone who could get that rasp of Dorinda, which is very unique and very hard to do. You had to work on Kiki's acting because they knew they could get her to match the singing. And then, of course, you had to find um, Belle, who played Twinkie's character, because she'd be able to sing and play and do all of that, which she can do, thankfully. So I think I don't critique that at all. I do think I wish it had been longer. I do think that I wish they could have added more information, such as about their brother, and even if it were me and I was able to repitch this to Lifetime and say, hey, let's come back into the studio and let's go ahead and let's go ahead and start filming part two. If they could have ended part one with Denise leaving the group and then given us more with those years, those 20 something years without her, that would have been phenomenal. Then I think that would have made more sense. I also kind of would have liked to have seen the younger girls, the younger actresses who played them. Um, I just think that I would have liked for there to have been more. I definitely picked up on little nuances like the father was there at Dr. Clark's funeral, so obviously they had somewhat mended things. And I believe the girls continued to sing for their dad's church after the divorce. So certainly they were able to somehow work that out. Um, I think the film was good. I think it was a really well acted film. I think people can critique the sisters, their relationship. I think most of that hopefully comes from a desire of wanting to see them reconcile. But I think the acting was just really good. And I definitely would say if I had to rate this in my grouping of biopics, especially let's talk about song biopics that I would watch again. I downloaded this app called Philo so I could watch it the night it came on, and I have since watched it 3 or 4 times. So I obviously really like this. I also like the New Edition. Some people don't like the New Edition story. I'm a New Edition stan, and I would definitely say Jackson's An American Dream, it's still number one. Okay, little Jason Weaver killed that. Jackson's The Temptations. I'm not going to count Five Heartbeats because it's not exactly a biopic. So I'm going to say Jackson's, The Temptations, the Clark Sisters, New Edition. Oh, what's love got to do with it? What? Okay. Scratch that. Okay, so we're gonna say what's love got to do with it? Jackson. Oh God, those are just top five. I'm not even gonna try to put them in order. Those are top five. So you put them in whatever order you want to put them in. But Jackson's, what's love got to do with it? Um, the Temptations movie, Clark Sisters, and New Edition. Those are my top five musical biopics that I watch again and again. I know I could say Ray, but I'm not that big of a Ray Charles fan. And it was good, and Carrie's good, and Regina's good, but it's not my favorite. That those are my top five favorites. So yeah, I think this is great. I love this. Let me know down in the comments below what you thought of the movie. What did you like? What did you not like? What did you want more of? What did you want less of? And do me a favor, if you liked this breakdown, which went longer than any other video I've ever made, and if you've managed to stick with me all this time, please do me a favor. Please give me a like, give me a thumbs up. Please, it helps me so much. It makes me feel validated and not crazy for coming on here and trying to make these videos and sounding crazy. So thank you guys so much. And until next time, toodles.